Hello everyone, welcome to Tech Sharmit. In this session, we are going to talk about another very important topic related to API, where we will see what is request and what is response in terms of API. So you might have heard about this term frequently when we are dealing with the API, right? So before we start with the practical examples, I just want to explain all the prerequisite or most useful terms that we frequently use when dealing with the API, so that things would be easier for you when you actually perform the operations using API. Okay, and that is why it is very important to understand what is request in API, what kind of information we will find in a request, and what is response that we capture from API. So these all things we will be discussing in this particular session. But before we proceed further with this session, I would like to recommend you to please go and check out the previously released session first, because they all are in proper sequence and sync. So if you follow it sequentially, then it would be much more easier for you to understand the ongoing topic, because for time being we are just mainly focusing on what is request and what is response, right? But prior to that, you should know what is API, how API works, and all the other basic things that we have already covered. Okay, and to make the things easier for you, I have already attached the Tech Sharmit digital course books in the description box. There you will find more than 3,500 plus free sessions available in both Hindi as well as English language. So without any language barrier, you can easily consume the content. And if you have any question over there, you can simply reach out to me through you can simply reach out to me through the comment section. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Here you can see I have noted down I have prepared a simple notes for you where I have explained everything related to request and response. So the very first question that you will see when you are in an interview or maybe an exam is what is request in terms of API, or you can say what is API request. Okay, so you have to explain it in a very professional manner. Not like that request is something that we send. So you have to explain it, like what exactly request is, what kind of information you are passing through it. So the question will come like this: what is API request? And then you have to answer in this way: a request is a message sent by the front end to the API asking for some data or action. Okay, so a request is a message sent by the front end to the API asking for some data or action. Okay. Second thing is, every API interaction starts using with a request. Okay. So whatever API communication you are going to build will be start with only a request, because if you are not requesting something, then it will not be able to proceed further. So this is the very first step when we are dealing with the API, because every API interaction starts with a request. Clear? Now this thing is clear, like what is request. So whenever we are requesting something, maybe some data or some action from the third party app, for example, in last session we took one example of weather application. So we wanted to know the weather of particular location. So in that case, if I'm sending some request, or if I'm sending some message to the weather application website or application through API, then that request where I'm requesting the information is considered as API request. Okay. Now the question comes, what all kind of information are present in the request? So there are multiple requests, like you can see a request usually contains URL, that is endpoint. So don't get confused in the later go. If we are calling something as endpoint, that means it is a REST URL, like where we want to send the request. Okay, so wherever we want to send the request through the API, then we need a URL or an endpoint where we want to send the request. So that is called URL. Second thing will be HTTP method. Which method? HTTP method. So it will tell the API what action to perform, like get operation, post operation, put, delete. There are many other, right? So for now I just mentioned here two, get and post. So this HTTP will will tell what kind of request we want to send through our application. Then we have headers. Headers will share the additional information, like whatever additional information we have will be passed through the headers. And then we have parameters. Parameters will tell the extra data. Again, that is optional. So these two things are conditional, like in some particular condition we are supposed to pass these headers or parameters if they are using any particular authentication or some kind of encoding kind of thing. Okay, so don't get confused. For now, just keep in mind that we have mainly 4 parts that we send as a request, which contains URL or endpoint, HTTP method, which could be get, post, put, delete, anything. And then we have headers and parameters. These headers and parameters are optional, that I'll tell you how we can make use of these optional parameter. Okay. Then we have example. So when you open a user page, Angular sends a request like get space / users. This means give me the list of all the user. Okay, so this is how we can send the request. This is just a small example, and in practical example I'll show you what all things are there. Okay, so I think this part is clear, like what is a request in Angular API. Now I'll explain you the next part, that is what is a response in API. So if we are particularly talking about the response, then it is the data written by the server through the API. Okay, so when we send some request to receive the data, in that situation we are also requesting some response, right? That is why we have requested the data. So that response, let's say same example, if we have requested the weather information from the application, and weather information is like temperature or maybe rain prediction, right? So these kind of information will be captured as a response. So response is nothing but a message, or you can say the data written by the server through the API. So actually it is forwarded by the server but via API, through API. Clear? Then we can say it is the answer to the request sent by the front end. So whatever thing we have requested with the API from the server, it will capture that response and it will be considered as an answer to the request which we send through the front end. Front end means Angular. Okay, so requesting a message sent by the Angular or front end to request something is a request, and response is something the data or a action written by the server through the API is called as a response. Okay, now let's see how we will get the response data. So mostly the response data is like contains these things. The first thing is data, yes, which is mostly in JSON format. I'll show you what is JSON format, but data would be most of the time it would be in a JSON format. Second thing is status code. That is very important, because these are the codes that will help us to identify whether the API request is successful or not. Okay, so this is called API status code. Okay, so which indicate both success as well as failure. Okay, now you can see API may return this. So this is ID and name. So for example, we have requested this ID and name from some third-party tool using API. So we will get the response in this format, and then we will extract the JSON data through some logic. I'll show you when we will capture this actually. Then I'll show you how we can make use of it. Okay. So this is the data Angular will display in the UI system. Fine. And then we have some key understanding for our today's session. So key understanding is very simple and straightforward, that yes, request is asking for something and response equal receiving the answer. Okay, so these are the two things, request and response. So when you are asking something, it is considered as a request, and when you are receiving something from the server, then it is considered as a response. Clear? So yeah, that's all what we planned for today's session, and I think now these two prerequisite terms are clear to all of you, and these are the terms like endpoint. Instead of URL, I'll refer the URL with endpoint name, right? So you should know what is endpoint, you should know what is request, you should know what is a response. If you know these terms, then it would be much more interesting for you to understand the ongoing the upcoming practical examples. Okay, so yeah, that's all for today. See you in the next session with new topics. So thank you for watching Tech Share with.